Okay, so Papa, how did you get into World War II?
The first thing I know, I was at the theater in Atlanta on Sunday afternoon, and the show would start at 1 o'clock and usually last about 2 hours. So sometime during that 2 hours, the screen stopped, the lights came on, and the manager of the theater came up on the stage and announced that Pearl Harbor had been bombed by the Japanese. And this meant that while he was telling us this, it was happening at that moment. Well, of course, we all talked and then went home. And I was volunteering, and Mom said no, that there would be enough older people that'd be filling up all of the recruiting places. And then I should go ahead and finish my schooling. I still hadn't finished high school then. And so I went ahead and went to finish high school and got 2 quarters at Emory. And in December of 42, 1 year later, I knew that it was time for me to get in the service. And we were talking, and some of my buddies, one of them said that naval aviation was the hardest thing to get into because they washed out 90% of the applicants. So the next day I went down and applied at the Naval Aviation. And all day long, they ran me every kind of test you can think of, physical, mental, psychological, you name it. And at the end of the day, I had one eye test, depth perception, and I wasn't quite good enough on one eye. And the doctor said, oh, you've been tired from working all day. So come back in the morning. So the next morning I came back in, passed the test, no problems, and was sworn into the Navy. And this was December. There was lots of people ahead of me, but because I was living in Atlanta, and that's where they ship people from, they put me on a list that if anybody didn't show up, was sick or something, I would replace them. So that's what happened in March of 43, I guess it was. I went in, first went to Columbia, South Carolina, what we call flight prep, just school, and then left there and went to St. Petersburg and learned to fly Cubs. And from there back to University of Georgia at Athens, where we had pre-flight, which was a lot of ground school, engines, everything like that, except flying. Left there and went to Memphis, which was Naval Air Station, and we flew planes that had double wings and a lot of wires and everything. It was a stunt plane, and flew those and just routine stuff, a lot of aerobatics. And it was the only plane I've really flown that you could fly upside down loop, which is fun because you're upside down and the centrifugal force is trying to throw you out of the plane. And left there and went to, I guess Pensacola was the next place. And there we flew SNVs, nicknamed multi-vibrators, all of these single engine. In fact, everything I flew was single engine. And went through all the training there, which was lots of navigation, because at that time we didn't have GPS, and you had to find out where you were. And this was something that they would wash you out in a hurry on. and I was good at it. In fact, at St. Pete, I helped the teacher teach the other boys navigation. Anyway, back to Pensacola, went through all training of instruments training, everything like that. But everything except dropping bombs, any deadly things. And I was commissioned in Pensacola and sent to Miami NAS as a torpedo pilot. And this is a model here of what I flew then from then on. And we learned how to fly off of carriers. We first flew with what we call field carriers, which would take a runway and mark out a spot on it like a big ship, aircraft carrier, and you learn how to come in and land. We did this daytime and nighttime. And we left there and went to the California desert with a lot of gunnery, bombing, and that was that. But we had already been dropping torpedoes. All the torpedoes used in the war at that time had to be tested 3 times before they went to the fleet. And we would use them to practice. We would drop the torpedoes on a target ship, and it was sent to go deep and go underneath the ship and run out of fuel pretty quick. And then a PT boat ran around, picked them all up, and they'd use them again till they had 3 that worked, and then they'd send them to the sea. And so I had a lot of planning with that, and a lot of formation flying. And we left there and we put in a special group that was to go fast. And turned out we didn't. We ended up in Seattle, NAS Seattle. Oh, before that, I had gone to Chicago, and they had a excursion boat they put a flat top on. It was called the U.S. Wolverine. And I learned to fly on a carrier in Lake Michigan. And they did that because they were doing it out of Jacksonville, and the German subs were causing too much trouble down there. So they built this ship and did the training in this Lake Michigan. So I qualified there, and then went from there to San Diego, and then from San Diego ended up from then on into Seattle, and then there was VC-85 squadron that was, I think, Iwo Jima, I'm not sure of that. And they had come back, they'd been shot up pretty bad, lost about half of their pilots. And they put enough of us with them to make a formation. And we were training with them and learning how to fly with them. And the one I was assigned to, he was terrible. He paid no attention to his wingman. He had always been a wingman. He had never led, and he didn't know how to lead. And one time, he put us into a cloud. I just left him and took off. I didn't trust him. Anyway, we will finish the training there and was waiting for the orders to the Pacific. We had been assigned to a carrier. I found out later on that we had 100 carriers in the Pacific at that time, when we started out with about 5. the beginning of the war. Anyway, while we were waiting for our orders, they dropped the bomb, and that was the end of the war and the end of my training. They closed that base. I was sent back to Seattle as a test pilot, and before I could even report, my number of points dropped to 36, and I could get out, so I immediately headed to the center and got discharged from the Navy. And that is about my life as a Navy pilot.
Okay, so you said that you said in the Navy, you didn't exactly. From what years did you serve?
So I was sworn in 42 and came out in 45.
So
About 3 years.
Oh, so that was very off. Okay, so you you did explain your events in the war. You said that you did serve in the Navy. Where exactly did you serve? Like, did you? I know that you said that you kept moving around a bunch, but did you keep going back to like one certain place, or did you have to keep on moving?
I never stayed in any place except Pensacola more than 3 months, and even at Pensacola, I was at least 3 or 4 fields there. So I was never anywhere over a matter of months.
Okay, and how has the world changed since that time?
Well, stop and think about it. At that time, we had 2 enemies, Germany and Japan. Germany was lost first. Now it's one of our allies. And Japan is also one of our allies. And their economies are much stronger than they were during the war. So that part of it has changed greatly. The plane I was flying, the TBMs, that probably were obsolete at that time. There's going to be a air show on the 20th, 21st up in Illinois for TBMs. And going to that. There are 8 of them still flying, and they're going to be there at the show. So if they're gone, that'll be the end of the TBMs. They had a 3,000 horse engine. The only speed you could get was going downhill. In other words, in a dive. I got 300 knots one time in a dive. It was the fastest I ever got to them. Their climbing ability was nothing. The plane was scheduled to climb to 20,000 feet in 30 minutes. It took me an hour to get there. So they started out with a tail gunner right here, and during the war, it shot down one Japanese observation plane, so they took them out. And at that time, radar was coming in, which was top secret. And they had a radio operator who was in charge of the radar, and it was nice. Some of my training goes off California coast, and there was a cloud cover between 1,000 and 1,300 feet, just flat. And there was 3 or 4 PT boats down in the water running maneuvers of some sort. So I run across the top of the cloud cover, and when my radar operator said 1,000 yards, I'd nose over and I'd come out just dead on top of them, and I would be diving on them, and they would see me and start trying to evade me. And we played there for quite a while. I'd keep going back up in the clouds and coming in from another direction. So we both learned a lot. That's,
And I see on this model that there were five or four spots. What spots exactly? Did you do all spots, or like were you the driver, the passenger, the gunner, and the bomber?
there were just three of us. There was this turret here had 250 caliber machine guns, and he could swing all around. And the Japanese did not like the torpedo planes because we could lock in 12 planes into an area not much bigger than a B-29. And we had 24 50 calibers at you. So they would come in that squadron, they would come in with lots of bullets. So they stayed away from us in formations.
I have a question. When you fly in formations, how close would y'all fly next to each other?
You could fly,
Like what kind of formation? A V formation or?
you have 3 planes and you have 4 sections of 3 planes. And they said staggered 1, 2, 3, and 1 before the tail. And the lead plane for you, in other words, your 3 planes. On that, you could put your wing right next to his. I mean, within a matter of 2 or 3 feet. It was nothing. And then it was his job to stay in position of the squadron so that if we had to, we could lock in even closer so that somebody coming in had facing a lot of bullets. And
Would they communicate? Would they communicate to you? Would your lead plane communicate, say, or would you just follow his lead as he flew?
we followed the lead. You never used radio except to receive orders telling you what to do. Lots of times we would be listening to the local music on the radio instead of listening to our instructor.
You said that you left the your commanding officer when you flew into a plane. When you flew, led the squad into the cloud. Do you know whatever happened to him?
Oh, I found him after that outside of the cloud and got back with him. I just wasn't going to stay that close because I didn't trust him. One time out of Miami, we were out, 3 of us, and came time to head for home. And so I decided which direction Miami was. I got down right on the water, 2 wingmen beside me, and ran. And all of a sudden, I hit Miami Beach, dead on. And I immediately pulled up and went across the housetops. My 2 wingmen, they 2 went up high. Somebody got their numbers and turned them in. They didn't get me. Now, in flying, when I was flying the Stearman, that was at Memphis, I had an instructor. You had 2 big mats that were large, and you landed on one and you took off on that one. And the only way you knew which way to go was to watch the wind tee, which told you where the wind was blowing, so you always went into the wind. And you'd find a clear spot on that mat, flying into the wind, and land or take off. I was landing, and an instructor didn't pay any attention to a change of the wind tee, and he was coming across in front of me, and I sat down on the brakes, and when I did, I rocked up and hit the prop and one wingtip and tore it up, but I didn't hit him. I just stopped in time to keep him hitting him. And my instructor took right back, put me back in another plane. We took off and came around. He says, "Now, I'll show you what you do. If this happens to you again, what you do is you open your throttle wide open you don't cut it, and you put your brakes on full. What you were doing, when you opened the throttle, all of that prop glass over the tail, forced the tail down and held it down, and your brakes were making you skip along the ground. So it would work. I learned that. Next time, I was flying SNJ out of Pensacola, and I made a perfect landing, which means I was on the ground and thought I was still in the air. I didn't even feel the wheels touch. And if you're flying in the air and a wing goes down, you have to hit the opposite rudder, which makes the plane turn, and wing picks up that wing, so you go. And if you're on the ground and the wing goes down, you're ground looping, so you turn the other way and it straightens it up that way. Well, with this SNJ, my wing went down. I didn't know I was on the ground, so I hit the opposite rudder and I wrapped it up. And what's crazy is that some months later, flying TBM, I did the same thing. All you have to do is just keep your eye on the horizon and keep it going straight. Super. So I should have been taught better. But anyway, also got credit for another plane. I was in charge of loading our planes onto the USS Ranger. We would take night landings on it, and my job to get them loaded on just happened to be the officer assigned to it. And the planes have a spot on each side where they hook a cable to so they can pick it up. And one side of this cable broke when we were halfway up, and the planes swam into the side of the ship and tore it up. And I was in charge, so I got charged with 4 U.S. planes. So one more plane out of a Japanese ace.
Well, this is a incredible story. Thank you for your service. I have no further questions. Do you guys? No?
No.
Okay.
But think of this, coming in on a carrier, it was really something, a lot of fun. You would come in and your landing signal officer, daytime would have flags, at nighttime they'd have wands, electric. And he would bring you in and give you a cut, and you would land. And it was fun, exciting, coming in and get the cut, chop it, throttle, you push it nose forward and bring it back. That's to sort of make the plane do this. And your hook would catch on the cable and stop you. And as you rocked forward, you would open the cowl flaps so that the engine wouldn't heat up while it was parked. And as my buddy said, what you do is when you get the cut, you fire it back, okay, Lord, you got it, because all you're doing is a rock falling. And as soon as you fall forward, you open the cowl flaps, you say, okay, Lord, I'll take it down.
Well, that's all I got.
Do you keep, have you kept in touch through the years of anybody that you did training with?
No, I don't even know my crewmen. I couldn't have known their names, Lance and Holiday. But I was looking at my logbook and their names were in there every time when they were with me. So I remember their names, but I didn't. And
So most of the men would they'd leave the service and just get on with their life, back to their
yes, now,
plan?
Cody Owen out of South Carolina was a buddy. He and Hank Lovett, also from South Carolina, and I were the 3 ones that nobody wanted to fly with. I didn't fly in formation because you couldn't sightsee in formation. I would get close enough and then sightsee, and I get screamed at and everything else. Well, Cody could fly better drunk than he could anybody else sober, and quite often he was drunk.
That's kind of concerning.
And Hank Lovett, he did dumb things on this ship I was telling you about that we would drop the torpedoes. He proceeds to drop the torpedoes, he thinks, and then makes a curve across the ship on the Tremelius. He thought he had his Bombay doors open. He didn't, he had them closed. And then when he dropped the fish, then he closed his Bombay doors. What he did is he dropped the fish into the vase, opened the Bombay doors, and out it fell. It almost hit the skipper who was on the ship.
Wow.
So they didn't like that. But the three of us, anytime you could judge anything, like bombing, anything, rockets, anything, we never got 1, 2, 3, but we never got below 4. We'd have 1, 2, 4, 1, 2, 3, you know. But we were good. And Cody stayed in. He became full lieutenant commander. One time when we were living in Atlanta, he called me, he was flying through town and just telling me where he was, what he was doing, and he was still in. And when he stayed in, and I said, well, when they were running the test on atomic bombs out the different atolls in the Pacific, he was an observation plane, and knowing Cody, he got a little too close and didn't realize this. And when they had a radioactive monitor on the plane, also a piece of film that kept it in his pocket that would tell him how much radiation he got. When he came back, both of them were loaded, and he still had 2 spots on his fingers he told me about that came because of the radiation.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
But at least got to watch him blow up an island while they told.
Now, you said that when you were flying the planes that you could almost like touch wings, correct?
Good, yeah. Mhm.
Did anyone ever try to switch planes, like walk onto?
Oh, heavens, no.
No, they weren't stunts.
We wrote that down. I had one that Cody ended up flying with, stayed in the Navy. He was our assistant squadron leader, and I didn't like him. And we were flying out down into Mexico, had no business being down there. And I was sightseeing out, and he kept screaming at me. And finally, he ordered me in. So I came in and put my wing within 3 feet of his, just right up on him. And he kept telling, get away. And I wouldn't do it. He shook my head at him. Because I could see him. I wasn't 50 feet from him, you know, right there. And finally, he turned away from me. And that was the last time he ever spoke to me.
What was the average age of the pilots?
Oh, 20, 21.
They're all young daredevils.
Well, you have to be young to be stupid enough to do the things we did.
But yeah, well, that's all my questions. So
Okay.
yeah,
Well, that was fun.
that was interesting. That was.